money is emotional, and one's relationship with money can also be quite emotional. Sometimes we just choose not to pay attention to the stressors around finances, either because we don't know why it's happening or we just don't have the capacity to deal with that. Now, I'm speaking in general terms. I'm not saying that every one of our clergy leaders functions that way, but often when money is creating the stress in the family, they don't want to talk about that in their congregations. Talking about money from the pulpit is highly uncomfortable if the pastor is not feeling that they are meeting the standards of their own financial health. Often there's shame associated with the fact that they may be experiencing some financial distress, something that we all have experienced at one time or another in our lives.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to For the Love of God. I'm Sheri Meister, and I'm the President and CEO of the Dakotas and Minnesota Methodist Foundations, and it's great to be with you all today. I'm so excited for our program today because we have Diane Owen with us, and Diane is the Director for Financial and Clergy Well-being in both the Dakotas and Minnesota, so we both have the area responsibilities. Diane, thanks so much for being here. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Sheri. I'm honored and privileged to be on your podcast, and I would love to share a bit about the work we've been doing around financial and clergy well-being over the recent years.
Start, Diane, with a little bit about how you came to this job and what it entails, and then we'll talk about how it evolved.
Oh, that sounds good. Well, I've been working for the Minnesota Annual Conference as a contract worker, primarily around the Healthy Church Initiative for several years. When we had the invitation to apply by Lilly Endowment for the grant, the initiative was called Economic Challenges Facing Our Pastoral Leaders. And I raised my hand for that opportunity to lead that particular initiative. And this was an area initiative, and I was excited about the opportunity to working across the area between the Dakotas and Minnesota annual conferences.
Well, and at that time, to explain to the listeners, the Episcopal area means we have one bishop that we share between Minnesota and the Dakotas. And this was really one of the first programs that reached across state lines or conference lines. And so tell a little bit about how you worked with pastors and our clergy with the financial well-being. What do you see as one of the toughest things to deal with that the pastors are dealing with in their financial world?
Sure. It was evident then, and it continues to be to a certain degree, that our clergy leaders often simply don't pay attention to their own financial well-being. We have brilliant clergy leaders. They're highly educated. They're very intelligent, but often to the detriment of themselves, they will focus on their ministry first. And it's so important for them to start paying attention to their own well-being, especially around finances. So that's what I noticed probably first. Not everybody is like that, but many. But then when you start digging deeper, there was perhaps some hesitancy to explore a relationship with money. Money is a word that, while Jesus used it many times in the Bible, pastors in the local church don't often feel comfortable with using the word money and talking about money in their local churches, much less about themselves. So how do we educate clergy to be financially literate on a personal level? And how do we help them understand church finance management? So those were the two pieces that we really started to focus upon. We also noticed there was a high level of educational debt. Whether you went to seminary or not, college education is expensive. and clergy leaders often were carrying that debt for many, many years. Let's face it, salaries of clergy leaders, especially local church pastors, aren't particularly high. And so there were many challenges that they were facing related to educational debt.
So talk a minute about what this opportunity with our Lilly Grant and the initiative has helped pastors in the student debt and the seminary debt, and how we've opened up opportunities for pastors to find a little relief.
Absolutely. Well, one of the first things we did was to make sure that every single pastor had the opportunity for education around personal finance. So we made that free for them, or subsidized or reimbursed, so they could explore other types of curriculum, such as Saving Grace, which you all as a foundation have graciously supported and provided our pastors with opportunity to learn about financial education through Saving Grace. So we've tried to remove that as a barrier. We work with Lutheran Social Services, Financial Choice. They have been a tremendous partner in providing financial counseling education for our pastors across the area. We also used our grant funds to fund the Investing in Leaders Resource Grant, which provides an opportunity for pastors and clergy in ministry to reduce their educational debt. So annually, we put out an application to these clergy leaders to apply for this. We ask them to submit their information about their loans. We make sure that they've had some financial education in the last 3 to 5 years, that they also work with a repayment loan counselor, ideally through LSS, but they're not required to work through Lutheran Social Services. We just want them to understand what their loans are all about and how they can navigate them in a healthy way. So those grant funds come directly from our Lilly initiative, along with a wonderful endowment that we received from the Burgum family in the Dakotas. And we continue to use the interest earnings from that endowment to help pay and resource this particular educational grant.
We've been very blessed with very supportive people, individuals, and kind of organizations together, such as Lilly, to come together for this well-being of the finances for clergy. I think sometimes that it's forgotten maybe a little bit of how the financial stress, personal stress, can impact a pastor's ministry, and how that sort of bridges over into that. Can you talk about that a little bit on how one affects the other?
Sure. Well, money is emotional, and one's relationship with money can also be quite emotional. Think about yourself. And I'm not saying you do this, I'm speaking in general terms. But when we're under stress, sometimes we engage in retail therapy, or sometimes we just choose not to pay attention to the stressors around finances, either because we don't know why it's happening, or we just don't have the capacity to deal with that. Now, I'm speaking in general terms. I'm not saying that every one of our clergy leaders functions that way, but often when money is creating the stress in the family or in the life of the clergy, they don't want to talk about that in their congregations. Talking about money from the pulpit, stewardship, generosity, how you need to be giving, is highly uncomfortable if the pastor is not feeling that they are meeting the standards of their own financial health. Are they giving to the level that they should be giving? Often there's shame associated with the fact that they may be experiencing some financial distress, something that we all have experienced at one time or another in our lives. Nonetheless, it impacts how they show up in their local church or in their ministry area. It becomes difficult for them once they start experiencing that shame and they start blaming themselves. When indeed it may not necessarily be their fault. There are many factors that contribute to the financial stress of our clergy leaders.
You know, we help clergy understand that if someone is in their giving patterns, if they start to decrease in their giving, that it's a bigger issue, it's a spiritual issue. Many times there's something going on in the home or with the family that in turn it shows up in their finances. And I think there's a little bit of that, or very similar things that happen with pastors. If they're stressed in that financial area, it's going to show up in the other things they do for ministry of the churches. So, you know, for Lily to have the foresight to be able to grant the magnitude that they did, because I can't remember how many $1 million grants they gave out that year, but it was incredible to try to get to the root of the problem and to help educate the pastors is really a blessing for many of our pastors have benefited from that. You know, I don't know if you remember this, but you and I were at a Lily meeting together, and they started to talk about clergy well-being. And I said, Diane, that is where you should be. Diane eats right, she runs, she's active all the time, she's helping people make good choices when there's options. You're very disciplined on your choices and your sweets and all of those things, and I wish more of that would rub off on me when we're together, Diane. But I knew that your heart is there for that. And then Lily came through with another grant for clergy well-being. And so it was really kind of a natural blend or a natural connection from the financial to the clergy well-being. And we're just so fortunate to have you in that position as well. So tell a little bit about how that grant came about and some of the things you've been doing with that to help our pastors.
Sure, I'd love to. So we refer to that as phase 3 of the economic challenges facing pastoral leaders. It took me a few years to be able to say that all in one breath. Nonetheless, it happened during the pandemic. And the data that we started receiving from local churches, clergy leaders in ministry elsewhere, was the impact of the pandemic, and coming out of the pandemic was extremely stressful. It did not mean that pastoral or clergy ministry was not stressful already. It just was amplified considerably with the pivoting that was required and the adjustments that our pastors needed to make during that time. Don't forget that even in their own lives, they were being impacted. You know, perhaps they had a family, children at home from school, or a spouse who lost a job. So there was layered experiences that contributed to a downtick, shall we, in well-being. And Lilly Endowment looked at that data. They sought that information out to know what was going on with our clergy leaders, and thus agreed to fund another round so that we could use those funds specifically to address well-being of our clergy leaders. Now, all along, I have felt that financial well-being is integrated, not almost, throughout every dimension of well-being. If you think about an individual's ability to go to a gym or buy healthy food, that has economic repercussions.
Yeah.
For sure. That's true almost of every dimension of well-being. You think about if I need to go see a counselor, I really need a spiritual director, I need to go on a spiritual retreat, I need to take time for renewal. All of those have economic implications. So Lily was spot on to earmark these funds for this purpose. So we were able to take those funds, and they wanted to see an immediate response in use of that. And we were able to offer our clergy a well-being grant that was fairly broad in the parameters,
Yeah, it was.
to apply to something that would assist and help their well-being. It was really fun to see the variety of things that people chose. And also the immense gratitude that our clergy leaders felt about, hey, people are paying attention to the struggles that we are experiencing. And here's like a real practical, quick solution that has maybe stuck with many for months and months, depending on what they chose to do.
Tell everyone, what are a couple of things that they chose to do? I mean, a spiritual retreat, what does that entail? Is the conference working to provide those retreats through this initiative? Just give a couple examples.
Sure. Well, we try to, what I call, broker resources as much as possible. Often individuals had a specific idea in mind. If they wanted a spiritual retreat, they usually had an idea. They did the research. So again, these are brilliant individuals, so they've already explored, like, what is the need that I have? Let's first really get clear on that, because well-being is integrated throughout all of the dimensions, but what would make the difference? For some, it was, I need some workout equipment because I am not able to go to my gym because it's closed down. So those early stages. Others, when things were opening back up, it's like, I want a regular practice of going to a gym. And they were able to solicit the support of their congregation, which, if I could say one thing that's critical about what congregations and church leaders can do, it is to provide support for when there's an effort or need to pursue these well-being dimensions. I had one person who took up welding and needed some welding equipment, and that was their, and maybe it was a renewal of their welding hobby, which I thought was fascinating. Others took up quilting or renewed their quilting. Other hobbies. Some went to see people they had not seen in 3 or 4 years because of the pandemic.
Oh, sure.
So connections and building relationships, or reestablishing relationships, were some of the things that individuals did. So we kind of ran the gamut, and we were kept the parameters fairly broad, because our clergy know what they need, and we need to trust them to identify those things.
I know that one of the things is family time too is very important for some of the younger pastors that have young children, and they, their weeks are consumed many times during the same time that children's activities are going on, and that family time. So there's times to go to our camps. The pastors can go to our camps for some of that renewal as well. And I don't know if many of our viewers or congregations are aware of that. That's another way they can help pastors find time to get away that's cost effective, because they can take advantage of one of the camps and enjoy some time, family time together.
Yeah, we're really lucky. Our Camping and Retreat Ministries has offered that benefit to both clergy in both conferences. I know that the Board of Pensions in the Dakotas Conference was able to subsidize that a bit more deeply, so that pastors could stay longer with families and have even a greater benefit. But Minnesota has also done a tremendous job providing that. I just had a new clergy person reach out to me yesterday, wanting to be reminded of what that opportunity was, because for the purpose of planning an experience with his new wife.
Nice.
Clergy gets sucked into ministry really fast, and they learn that there isn't a lot of time. I was on a call today with a pastor who I was discussing with him his rhythms, and it's really important that boundaries are established. And that's one of the things that we try to do, is to remind clergy through a variety of training experiences, whether it's orientation or Clergy Leadership Academy, the importance of establishing good boundaries in your ministry, as well as establishing rhythms of taking your Sabbath day, and time for errands. Those are two different things, right? Doing the laundry is not Sabbath, and really helping them to get clear on that. Also, how to plan vacation, how to approach renewal leaves and those opportunities. Our grant has provided pastoral coverage funding for public supply and for short and long-term leaves with the help of both pension boards across the area. This pastor I talked with today was really in a new appointment, was trying to figure out their family rhythms, because he now has responsibility for dropping, his wife works full-time, dropping kids off in the morning to their various schools, picking them up in the afternoon. And so I said, when are you finding time for your own health and well-being? Because you need to create space to take care of yourself too. Although I'm sure it was delightful to pick up your children after school.
Right.
And he knows, but it is about paying attention to those rhythms. And I try to be a constant reminder to ask the questions.
How many times a month do you think you say that? How are you taking time for yourself and taking care of you too, to individuals? Because I've heard that from you. And so I'm wondering how many times you do say that for people across the conferences.
Well, every time I talk to any of our leaders, I will ask that question in some form or fashion.
You do try to change it up a little bit, how you ask it. So.
Well, I don't want it to become a boring question. And maybe I'll get a different response next time, depending on how I ask the question. So,
I
but
think
it's important.
Yeah, and I think what I do appreciate is that you're not expecting everyone to be in the wellness routine that you're in. I mean, you're very disciplined in all those areas. But to find some places that you can take that time and to be good to yourself in the way that works for the individual.
Well, you described what I do to take care of my physical self. There are things that I can improve upon that maybe haven't been mentioned. Don't need to mention those now, but there's so many areas of well-being that need to be tended to. I think it's really important that our clergy spend some time in reflection. Like, what will make the difference? Where can I grow? And that's really the most important word. Where does growth need to happen in the whole person? So that you raise one level of your well-being, it will affect the others. At least that's been my discovery, whatever that is.
What gives you hope as we look for the next chapter in our clergy and ministry and society, and all these things are sort of bubbling up in different pockets? And is it the perfect storm, or are we just living in many areas of chaos right now? What is your hope for what you see in everyone who you work with?
Well, it has been the mission of this work to embed the value of clergy well-being into our conferences so that we strengthen the resiliency of our clergy leaders. Because we know the chaos that we're experiencing today, we've experienced in a different way in the past.
Right.
We're going to experience it again in the future. And the key is resilient leaders who can deal with difficult situations. And even if they fall down, they have the strength within to step back up and keep going. And that is the critical difference. They get up and keep going because they have cared for the whole person. And my second hope is that they will model this for their congregations and their communities so that they too will understand the importance of whole person care and resiliency.
That's great, and those are great reminders for all of us. Because every time I visit with you, I have something to take away from it, but a reminder of how things can, just the way you look at things and how you take those situations and how do you learn from them, how do you not get bogged down in them, and what are you doing for your own work to be able to work through some of those situations. If we have a listener that has been thinking about it for a long time about what they could do to take that very first step, what is the first step that you would advise anyone to do if they wanted to start this track of well-being, either financially, whole well-being, or together?
Well, I mean, there's certainly lots of resources out there, but I think it's to pause and take some time to do some reflection on how am I doing? Where am I struggling? Where is there a growth opportunity? And you have to begin there. And where is God speaking into my life? That, I want to be the best person possible, which is the person God wants me to be. So what am I hearing? And we can't get there if we don't take time to pause. And that's why I go back to taking a Sabbath day or a day off or just some time away. You cannot hear the voice of God in all the craziness of life and ministry without slowing down. So that would really be the number one thing. Secondly, if they're just simply like, I really don't know, it's great to have a conversation partner, a close friend, colleague, spouse or partner, or myself. I have a plethora of resources. I can just help point people in a direction to explore. Sometimes it's just discovery. There's a lot out there, but the first step is just to slow down and actually give thought to it.
I think sometimes the pastors get this view from the outside world that they work on Sundays and there's not any work the rest of the week. They have to prepare a sermon, but then they have an hour on Sundays, 2-3 hours. What resources and how is the best way for us to continue to educate our congregations so that they understand the magnitude of the jobs that pastors have been called to do, and where can they be of help and support to the pastor?
Well, it may seem obvious, but you need to ask the pastor. I was talking to another clergy leader who recently went through an appointment transition, and they were there for almost 3 months before their staff parish relations committee even said, how are you doing? How are things going? And in fact, as I recall the conversation, they didn't even ask that question because this pastor had to bring it to their attention what the first 3 months had been like. And it had been challenging. So the first thing is to ask. The SBRC is the advocate for pastor and any church staff. They need to ask, how is it going? What can we do for you? What are your needs? Related to that is really the pastor needs to set some boundaries and share those with SBRC and leadership. Often the previous pastor may not have set the same boundaries, or they were different boundaries. That doesn't work for the incoming pastor. So they need to really be clear on those boundaries and have an honest conversation, usually with the SBRC and leadership team, about expectations, both ways. I think being clear and transparent is really important. We're in the middle of October, well, October 1st, we're not in the middle, but we're approaching the middle, right? We're entering, and it's Staff and Clergy Appreciation Month. And we do send out resources about like, well, what do we do with this? Do something with it. I mean, how do you want to express your appreciation for staff and clergy leaders? there are many simple things that can be done, and our conference communications, they do a great job. So expressing appreciation is another way. I want to say one more thing. Pay attention to the salary of your clergy. There has been tremendous investment of time and education into becoming a clergy leader. The return or salary is not always comparable. And when a church gets into financial distress, one of the first things they think about doing is cutting salary, because it is a lion's share of the church budget. That does not set a good precedent for the future. And I know working with the foundations is a way to help figure out what's going on with financial stress in the church. Cutting resources is not, in my opinion, helpful, especially when you're cutting pastoral leadership. Furthermore, not giving your pastor any kind of raise, like cost of living minimally, is not helpful.
Diane, when we were talking about the Lilly Endowment, a program that we partnered with Dakota Wesleyan University emerged out of this Lilly grant and this opportunity and the conferences working together. Will you talk a little bit about that and how it started and where it's at now?
Oh, I would be delighted. The Practical Church Leadership Certificate Program is a graduate program, a year-long graduate certificate program that emerged as a result of our observations that our clergy leaders were lacking in some key competencies that were essential to leading a local church or a ministry per se. And with your support, because you walked me across the street to meet leaders at Dakota Wesleyan University, we began sharing our vision for what we hope. And that is some greater or more intense, shall I say, opportunity for education around competencies of financial management, financial development, human resources and staff development, strategic planning, communications and outreach, you name it. These were all kind of in that administrative arena that clergy leaders don't learn in seminary or perhaps in other places. And so we were really excited with the speed and nimbleness that Dakota Wesleyan was able to create the Practical Church Leadership Certificate Program that we offer our clergy across the area. We are able, through the Lilly Endowment's initial grant for economic challenges, to subsidize 80% of the tuition. And this graduate tuition and credits that they can put towards a master's degree. They're like 2/3 of the way there by completing this program. Every year this program has improved. It has been met with a lot of positive feedback. Pastors emerge more confident in their leadership amongst certain teams within their local churches where before maybe they didn't feel quite as confident. They've been able to fundraise, increase giving contributions in their local churches, manage their staff more effectively, take a look at their communications and outreach programs in new ways. I mean, it's just been amazing. What's even more amazing about Practical Church Leadership is it's now scaling across our denomination.
Right.
We even have some Lutherans that participate, and which is wonderful. We need some cross-pollination, right? But this is all under the leadership of Dr. Alicia Vincent and a variety of highly trained coaches as well as instructors. And every year we have pastors from either Minnesota, Dakotas, conferences, or both who participate in this particular program. And we've been able to continue this as we've started moving some apportionment dollars into the program, and we have another endowment that we were able to draw the interest. The Breidendorf Endowment was a gift that would continue to subsidize and help us keep clergy in this particular program. So just another example. I mean, Lilly endowment began in the early days with just some investments that has blossomed into millions and millions of dollars. And then we also have had some endowments as well, and we've been blessed to have those.
I think one of my favorite stories from the PCL is one of the pastors implemented a stewardship program throughout the year in their church, and they increased their giving by 20% in following the procedures and the processes that they had put in place that was personalized to that church, but it all came out through the PCL program. And just that intention and that intentional work of concentrating gives the pastors the confidence, and then of course the confidence increases when you see the giving increase at a 20% gift. So that I think that's just wonderful that they're able to come out of that program and apply it immediately in the churches that they serve, and sometimes during.
Right. Often the assignments they receive have practical application immediately. And there are more stories like the one you just named, where increases in giving have occurred as a result of the application of the work and the learning.
And some of them have strengthened their organizational or their operating model and helped church members understand the importance of strong leadership within the structure of the committee structure. And any of those pieces have been really beneficial to the churches. I know we've gotten surveys back from the churches of how much they appreciate when their pastors have been through the program. So it's been wonderful. And I love that it's spread across the denomination in different ways. I hear from my colleagues often that they, too, the foundations are supporting their pastors in their conferences to attend or go through the program. So I just think it's fun to see those stories come back.
Right. And I'm proud that we gave birth in partnership with Dakota Wesleyan.
So we're going to finish up here soon, but just the one thing that I've noticed through our conversation today is the number of connections that have been put together to make all of this well-being, all of the financial focus happen. This isn't just a one-dimensional program of any. Do you have any comments on that about how you've been able to connect those pieces together and what benefits you've seen from that?
Sure. Collaboration is key. I don't know everything, neither does anybody else. And it's really important to learn what is happening in the spaces that I'm trying to affect or impact by connecting with. We've worked closely together, obviously, as the foundations. I've worked closely with Dakota's Board of Pensions. I've worked with Minnesota Conference Board of Pensions. They both have provided funding for one for pastoral renewal leaves. The other is entertaining the same thing and has funded a Thriving Ministry, which is a clergy well-being initiative out of Lilly. I have spent time just making sure that I talk to all the clergy leaders, conference superintendents. I interact with WestPath that has a plethora of well-being resources, that's available. Our partnership with Dakota Wesleyan. I could go on and on, but it's important to learn what others are about and what they're doing, and also to ask them to join you in that common goal. There's no sense in us working in silos and, to use your phrase, and working independently when we can be stronger together and leverage each other's knowledge, talents, and passion for our mission and our connection.
Yeah, great. I think sometimes when people are building programs and they're working at finding things to help people, they think they have to do it alone. And even our pastors, I'm sure they feel real lonely sometimes because they're the only one with that job in the facility that they have. But the message of connections and working together and finding other resources to help strengthen anything that you're working on is always better at the end.
Well, we're a connectional system.
Yes, we are.
So we need to use it to our advantage,
Right.
right?
Yeah. So, anything else you'd like to say as we close here? I just want to thank you so much for joining us today and for all the work that you're doing and the impact you're making across not only the conferences, but across the connection.
Well, there's a great deal more work to do. It's not solved in a short few years, but I hope we're making some progress. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share what has been happening over recent years.
Yeah, so thanks. Thanks everyone for joining us. Until next time, we will see you back here again.